We all know about Porsche, a company with an intriguing past and uncertain future. The Porsche 911 has achieved iconic status in automotive history. Even people who aren't interested in cars have heard something about it. But far fewer people know that in addition to building cars, Porsche is involved in other interesting endeavors. Meet Porsche Design, a design studio founded in 1972 by Ferdinand Alexander Porsche, the grandson of the company's founder and the designer of the original 911. Today, the Porsche Design logo is primarily associated with watches and eyewear for the rich people. But in the past, the studio also created whimsical designs in collaboration with other manufacturers. And today, we'll be talking about one of those monstrosities. Well, as tradition, here's a little backstory about how I ended up with this in the first place. I never taken photos on film as an adult. My mother had a simple point and shoot in the late 90s and early 2000s. I took a few pictures with it as a kid, but nothing intentional. And of course, when the family got its first digital camera, everyone immediately forgot about the film. So I think it's safe to say that before this camera, I had never taken photos on film. Last year, after my time with Lumix XS1, I bought a mirrorless camera and started taking photos frequently. One day, an old family friend found out about it and said, "Oh, Yagi, are you into photography again? You know, I have this old, cool and expensive camera that I bought myself back in the 90s, and I can give it to you." Of course I agreed, and my imagination immediately started running wild about what it might be. Maybe it was some kind of SLR from the 90s, or maybe even a Leica or Contax. Reality, of course, turned out to be more prosaic. The cool and expensive camera turned out to be this Samsung ECX1, with the logo designed by F.A. Porsche. Despite these claims, I find the camera's design rather questionable. I like how one photographer online called it the camera vault equivalent to a crazy concept car. Funnily enough, the camera even won some design awards back in 1994. It's clearly larger than the average point and shoot and approaches the size of a full-fledged SLR with interchangeable lenses. And the zoom lens extends to an obscene length. The only thing I like about its design is that big LCD display on top, which even has a backlight. It came in only two color options, black and silver with a black handle. Well, now I'll give you the boring details about its specs for camera nerds. Of course, it only supports 35mm film. It has a DX code reader, ISO ranges from 25 to 3200. If there are no DX code on the film, the ISO will always default to 100. The lens focal length is 38 to 140mm. Zoom is fully electric. The widest aperture is f3.8 at 38mm to a whopping 10.5 at max focal length. Shutter speeds are from 1/3 of a second to a strange 1/400th of a second. And of course bulb mode. It has integrated flash, which is somewhat good, but like firing literally at every mode no matter what. It has a built-in light meter and autofocus. Yes, these two strange looking holes are not the design choice, but an autofocus system. My model also has quartz date printing, but I never used it. I'm sure some people might like this aesthetic in photos, but it's definitely not for me. It's powered by two CR123A batteries, which were kinda pricey. Now let's talk about its various functions. There are 4 buttons on the top that control different functions: flash, focus, mode and self. And to be honest, thank goodness I found the camera manual online. A huge thank you to whoever scanned and posted it, because without it, figuring out the camera settings would have been really difficult. For example, you adjust the exposure compensation by pressing the flash button and then pressing the plus and minus buttons at the back. And really, exposure compensation and turning the flash off were the only features I used here. It has a multi-beam and a single beam autofocus. To be honest, I don't know what's the difference between them. Same goes for snap focus mode. There is a manual mode where you choose the focus length with plus and minus button. However, I almost always use only the first mode. Let's move on to the mode button. The first mode is normal, which I think is self-explanatory. Second one is called fuzzy zoom. It's a pretty strange name, but from what I gather from the manual, it's some kind of image stabilization mode, perfect for hands that are always shaking. The next one is portrait zoom. It's I can't explain what this does. And after this is step zoom mode, and like, who the heck need mode like this in a point and shoot? Same with continuous shot mode. Who will use this on a damn film camera? At least the following setting makes some sense. It's a multi-exposure shot. According to the instructions manual, you can make them as many as you want. I took exactly one photo in this mode, made sure it worked, and then forgot all about it, since I don't really have much of an imagination when it comes to double exposure photos. And we are left with the interval shooting mode, which comes with a very expensive note, and there is always a bulb mode, which tells us that the maximum exposure time is 60 seconds. I think that cover all the modes. The only thing left is the timer, which I won't even bother mentioning, since I never used it myself. Also, there are still two buttons I completely forgot about while using the camera. The landscape button on the front to focus on the infinity, which you actually have to press before the shutter button, and the macro mode button, which for some reasons zooms in as far as it can. So-called macro mode, I tell you, with a minimum focusing distance of 16 cm and an f10 aperture. And of course, how could I forget about the glorious panorama mode, which is even mentioned in the camera's name. It simply crops the negative from the top and bottom. Plus, the manual sternly warns that you need to let the film lab know about this and get some special treatment. I have no idea if that's true or not, I just didn't use it because I didn't take any landscape photos with it. Viewers who know their way around film photography will ask, Yagi, what kind of film stock did you use in that? And I reply, Fujifilm Eterna 160T. But that kind of film isn't available on the market, you might say. And you will be right, because I first bought film stock for this camera, not really knowing much about it. I bought the cheapest color film on an online marketplace, which turned out to be this Fujifilm. Then, sometime later, when I started learning about film, I found out that it was actually film for motion picture cameras, and expired at that. Apparently someone in Russia had a lot of this film left over, and decided to wind it onto spools and sell it as a film stock. When I found out about this and the phenomenon of expired film, I thought, well, that means all the photos will not be good. But despite all that, my first photos on film turned out pretty good, I'll tell you. The only exception is photos taken in low light, which turn out blurry even with the flash. After all that, you're probably thinking this is a great camera and that I use it often, right? Unfortunately no, and here's a bunch of reasons why. The camera is very uncomfortable for me to use. It sort of has a comfortable grip, but the viewfinder is microscopic. And for me, it was a real struggle to frame a shot through it, especially with shaky hands. Then, despite all these modes, the camera lacks the most basic one, manual mode. You can't change the shutter speed or aperture, the camera chooses everything on its own. And since I believe that the most important thing about the camera is the process of photography itself, I didn't bother loading a new roll of film into it. Besides, film photography isn't exactly cheap these days. You pay for the film roll and for the film lab. Maybe someday later, so I really hope I won't have to buy these expensive batteries again. Essentially, it's a typical example of so-called dead cam. Why do you need all this nerd stuff when this cool camera from Porsche will do everything for you, and you will look really cool and rich among all of these ordinary dead photographers, and so on. Well, that wraps up the story of my first film camera. Despite the camera itself, I really enjoyed shooting on film. Later on, I even bought a couple of old mechanical film cameras. What those stories are for the future videos. I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please support my channel by subscribing and watching my other content as well. This will encourage me to make more videos in the future. In any case, thank you for watching all the way through. More photography related content to come, so I'll see you later.